The woman collapsed against his gate, just as the first howl of wind cut through the December night, her sobs rising above the storm like a prayer torn from desperate lips. Vincent Vale heard her cry from inside his modest ranch house, 3 miles outside Trinidad, Colorado. And something about that sound cut straight through the whiskey-warmed haze he had been nursing since sundown. He set down his glass, moved to the window, and peered through the frost-gathering glass to see a dark shape crumpled against the wooden posts of his property entrance. The year was 1881, and winter in southern Colorado could kill as surely as any outlaw's bullet. Vincent grabbed his heavy coat and hat, lit a lantern, and pushed out into the bitter cold. Snow had begun to fall in earnest now, fat flakes swirling in the lamplight as he hurried down the path. As he drew closer, he could make out more details. A woman, young from what he could tell, wearing a thin shawl over a dark dress that offered little protection against the elements. Her hands clutched the gate bars, and her whole body shook with cold and grief. "Madam," he called out, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Madam, can you hear me?" She lifted her face toward him, and even in the dim lantern light, he could see the tracks of tears frozen on her cheeks, her lips blue with cold. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, the look of someone who had retreated somewhere deep inside themselves where the world could not reach. "Please," she managed through chattering teeth. "My husband, he is gone," I walked. I did not know where else to go. Vincent did not waste time with more questions. He unlatched the gate, set the lantern down, and carefully lifted the woman into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her body rigid with cold. He grabbed the lantern with his free hand and carried her back toward the house, moving as quickly as he dared on the ice-slicked path. Inside, the warmth of the fire hit them both. Vincent kicked the door closed behind them and carried the woman to the chair nearest the hearth. She had stopped crying now, but her whole body continued to tremble violently. He grabbed every blanket he owned and wrapped them around her, then moved to stoke the fire higher. "I am going to make you something hot to drink," he said. "You need to warm up from the inside out or the cold will have its way with you." She nodded mutely, staring into the flames. Vincent put a kettle on to boil and rummaged through his cupboards for the tin of tea his sister had sent him last Christmas. He was a coffee man himself, but right now this woman needed something gentle. While the water heated, he studied her more carefully. She was young, probably no more than 22 or 23 years old, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and now hung in damp tangles around her face. Even exhausted and half frozen, she was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten. Vincent was 31 years old and had been alone on this ranch for the better part of 6 years. He had built the place up from nothing after mustering out of the cavalry, working sun up to sun down to create something that was his own. He had never been much for town life or socializing, preferring the company of his horses and cattle to most people. But standing here now, watching this broken woman warm herself by his fire, he felt something shift inside him that he had thought long dead. The kettle whistled, and he poured the hot water over the tea leaves, letting them steep before bringing the cup to her. "Careful," he said. "It is very hot." She took the cup with shaking hands and sipped cautiously. Some color began to return to her face. After several long minutes of silence, she finally spoke. "My name is Sarah Reeves," she said quietly. "My husband was Thomas Reeves. We had a homestead about 10 miles north of here. He went out yesterday morning to check the fence line before the storm came in. His horse came back without him at sunset. I searched until dark, but I could not find him. This morning I went out again as soon as there was light. I found him in a ravine. He must have fallen. His neck was broken." Vincent felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "I am very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Reeves." "Sarah," she said, "I cannot bear to be called Mrs. Reeves right now. It reminds me too much of what I have lost." "Sarah, then. My name is Vincent Vale. You can call me Vincent." He pulled up another chair and sat down across from her. "Where is your husband now? I could not move him by myself. He is still where I found him." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I tried so hard, but I could not lift him. I am not strong enough." "You did everything you could," Vincent said firmly. "A woman alone in winter cannot move a grown man's body. That is not weakness. That is just reality." "I did not know what to do," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "We have been in Colorado for only 8 months. We came from Missouri looking for a fresh start. We had no family here, no close neighbors. I saw smoke from your chimney as I was walking, and I just kept moving toward it. I did not know if anyone would help me. I did not know if anyone would even answer the door. But I could not stay in that house alone, knowing he was out there in the cold." Vincent reached over and took the empty teacup from her trembling hands. "You are safe now. Tomorrow, when the storm passes, I will ride out with you and bring your husband back. We will take him into Trinidad and see that he is properly buried. But tonight, you need to rest. You have been through something terrible and your body needs time to recover." "I cannot impose on you," Sarah protested weakly. "You are not imposing. I am offering." Vincent stood and moved toward the small bedroom off the main room. "You will take my bed. I will sleep out here by the fire. And before you argue, understand that I will not hear otherwise. You are exhausted, grieving, and half frozen. You need real rest." Sarah looked like she wanted to protest further, but she simply did not have the strength. She nodded and allowed Vincent to help her to her feet. He guided her to the bedroom and lit the lamp on the bedside table. "There are extra blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed if you need them," he said. "Call out if you need anything." "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "You have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect." Vincent nodded and closed the door quietly behind him. He returned to the main room and stood for a long moment staring into the fire. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, throwing snow against the windows. He thought about the young woman in his bed, suddenly widowed in a harsh land far from home. He thought about the body of her husband lying in a ravine, waiting for the storm to pass. And he thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought her to his gate on this frozen night. He made himself a bed of blankets on the floor near the hearth and lay down, but sleep was a long time coming. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah's face, so pale and lost. He found himself wanting to protect her, to shield her from every hard thing the world might throw at her. The intensity of the feeling unsettled him. He barely knew this woman. She was freshly widowed, deep in grief. It was not appropriate for him to be having such thoughts, but the thoughts came anyway, persistent as the wind. When morning came, the storm had blown itself out, leaving the world buried under 2 feet of fresh snow. Vincent rose before dawn and built up the fire, then started coffee brewing and began making breakfast. He was frying bacon when Sarah emerged from the bedroom, looking slightly more rested but still haunted. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you were able to sleep some." "A little," Sarah admitted. "More than I expected to, anyway. The bed was very comfortable. Thank you again for your hospitality." "Sit down and eat something," Vincent said, gesturing to the table. "You will need your strength for what comes next." They ate in companionable silence. Vincent found himself watching the way the morning light caught in Sarah's dark hair, the delicate movement of her hands as she lifted her coffee cup. He forced himself to look away and focus on his food. After breakfast, Vincent went out to saddle his 2 best horses and hitch a third to a small sledge he used for hauling wood and supplies. Sarah had given him directions to where Thomas's body lay, and they set out into the brilliant white landscape. The ride took nearly 2 hours, the horses struggling through the deep snow. Sarah rode in silence, her face set in grim lines. When they reached the ravine, Vincent dismounted and carefully made his way down the steep slope. Thomas Reeves had been a man in his mid-20s, tall and well-built. He lay at an awkward angle, half buried in snow, his neck twisted in a way that confirmed Sarah's assessment. Vincent said a brief prayer before beginning the difficult work of getting the body up the slope and onto the sledge. Sarah watched from above, her face pale but composed. When Vincent finally had Thomas secured and covered with a canvas tarp, she said quietly, "He was a good man. He did not deserve this." "I am sure he was," Vincent replied. "And you are right. He did not deserve it, but the land does not care about what we deserve. It just is." They made the long journey back to Vincent's ranch in silence. When they arrived, Vincent said, "I think it best if we keep him in the barn for now. Tomorrow I will ride into Trinidad and make arrangements with the undertaker. Is there anyone you would like me to notify?" Sarah shook her head. "We had no family out here. Thomas had a brother back in Missouri, but we had not spoken to him in over a year. There was a disagreement. I do not even know how to reach him." "What about the homestead?" Vincent asked. "Do you have livestock that need tending?" "Just 3 chickens and a milk cow," Sarah said. "Oh God, I forgot about them completely. They have been alone for 2 days now. Then after we settle Thomas in the barn, we will ride to your place and take care of them," Vincent said. "We can bring them back here for now. You should not be staying out there alone anyway, not until we figure out what comes next." Sarah started to protest, but Vincent held up a hand. "I know you are independent. I know you do not want to be a burden, but facts are facts. You cannot run a homestead alone in winter, especially not after what you have been through. Let me help you. We will sort everything out, but first things first." So they settled Thomas in the barn, then rode to the Reeves homestead. It was a modest place, a small cabin with a lean-to barn and a few outbuildings. The animals were cold and hungry, but otherwise fine. Vincent helped Sarah pack some of her personal belongings. Then they loaded the chickens into a crate and led the cow back to his ranch. By the time they returned, it was late afternoon. Vincent got the animals settled while Sarah insisted on making dinner. They worked in an easy rhythm that surprised them both, moving around each other in the small kitchen as if they had done it 100 times before. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Vincent rode into Trinidad and made arrangements for Thomas's burial. The town's small cemetery was mostly frozen, but the undertaker and gravedigger managed to prepare a plot. The funeral was held on a cold, bright morning with only Vincent and Sarah in attendance. The preacher said words about dust and resurrection, while Sarah stood rigid beside the grave, her face hidden behind a black veil Vincent's sister had sent over when she heard the news. After the funeral, Sarah moved through the days in a kind of fog. She helped with chores around the ranch, cooked meals, mended clothes, but she spoke little and smiled not at all. Vincent gave her space while trying to remain supportive. He found himself thinking about her constantly, worrying when she was too quiet, wanting to see some spark return to her eyes. Christmas came and went with little fanfare. Vincent bought a small tree and set it up, more to give Sarah something to focus on than out of any real holiday spirit. She made decorations from scraps of fabric and paper, and for a few hours while they worked together, he thought he saw something like peace cross her face. On New Year's Eve, they sat by the fire after dinner, listening to the wind outside. Sarah had been particularly quiet all day, and Vincent finally asked, "What are you thinking about?" She was silent for so long he thought she might not answer. Then she said, "I am thinking about how strange it is that I am here. 2 weeks ago I was married. I had a home and a future I thought I understood. Now Thomas is gone, and I am living in a stranger's house, and I do not know what comes next." "You are not living in a stranger's house," Vincent said quietly. "You are living in the house of someone who cares about what happens to you." Sarah turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "Why have you been so kind to me, Vincent? You did not know me. You had no obligation to help." Vincent chose his words carefully. "When I heard you crying at my gate that night, something in me responded. I cannot fully explain it. But from the moment I saw you, I knew I would do whatever I could to help you. That has not changed." "I do not deserve your kindness," Sarah whispered. "You deserve every kindness," Vincent said firmly. "You deserve to be cared for and protected. You deserve to be happy, even though I know that seems impossible right now." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "I do not know if I will ever be happy again. I feel so lost, Vincent, so completely lost." Without thinking, Vincent moved to sit beside her and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. He held her and let her cry, one hand gently stroking her hair. He murmured soft reassurances, words he did not even fully register, just sounds meant to comfort. When her tears finally subsided, Sarah pulled back slightly and looked up at him. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not mean to fall apart like that." "You have nothing to apologize for," Vincent said. He became aware of how close they were, how her face was only inches from his. He could see every detail, the dampness of her eyelashes, the slight redness of her nose, the full curve of her lips. Something electric passed between them, and for a moment he thought about kissing her, but he did not. She was grieving, vulnerable. He would not take advantage of that. Instead, he gently released her and stood up. "It has been a long day. We should both get some rest." Sarah nodded, looking almost disappointed. "Yes, of course. Good night, Vincent. Good night, Sarah." January turned to February, and the deep cold began to ease slightly. Sarah continued to stay at the ranch, and slowly, incrementally, Vincent saw her begin to come back to life. She laughed at something one of the barn cats did. She hummed while making bread. She started talking about spring planting and what vegetables they might grow. Vincent noticed every small change, treasured every smile. His feelings for her had grown beyond anything he had experienced before. He was in love with her, completely and irrevocably. But he kept those feelings locked away, certain that it was too soon, that she needed more time to heal. One evening in late February, they were working together in the barn, feeding the horses and mucking stalls. Sarah was telling him a story from her childhood, something funny about a pet goat, and she was actually laughing. The sound was so beautiful it made Vincent's heart ache. "It is good to hear you laugh," he said when her story finished. Sarah's smile softened. "It is good to laugh again. For a long time I thought I never would, but you have given me something I did not think I would find again." "What is that?" Vincent asked. "Hope," Sarah said simply. "And maybe something more than that." She moved closer to him, and Vincent felt his pulse quicken. "Sarah," he said carefully, "I need you to know something. These past few months, having you here, getting to know you, it has meant everything to me, but I do not want to presume anything. I do not want to rush you or make you feel pressured." "You are not rushing me," Sarah said. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his bearded cheek. "I know what I feel, Vincent. I know it might seem too soon to some people. Thomas has only been gone 2 months. But death has a way of teaching you that life is short and precious. I spent 2 months grieving what I lost. I do not want to waste any more time being afraid of what I might find." "And what do you think you might find?" Vincent asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I might find love again," Sarah said. "If the man standing in front of me feels the same way." Vincent pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it was like coming home to a place he had never been before. Sarah kissed him back with an intensity that spoke of longing and new beginnings and the courage it took to open your heart after loss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Vincent said. "I have loved you for weeks now, maybe from the very beginning. I just did not know how to tell you." "I love you too," Sarah said. "It scared me at first, feeling this way so soon, but Thomas would not have wanted me to spend the rest of my life alone. He was a good man, and he would have wanted me to be happy. And you make me happy, Vincent, so very happy." They stood together in the barn, holding each other while the horses nickered softly in their stalls, and the February wind whistled outside. It felt right in a way that Vincent had not known was possible. He had opened his door and his heart to a woman crying at his gate on a frozen night, and in doing so, he had found the other half of his soul. Over the next few weeks, their relationship deepened. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Vincent learned that Sarah had been a schoolteacher before marrying Thomas, that she loved reading and music, and the way morning light looked on fresh snow. Sarah learned that Vincent had served in the cavalry for 8 years, that he had a sister in Denver and a brother in Texas, that he had come to Colorado looking for peace after too many years of violence and death. They were careful with each other, respectful of boundaries, but the love between them was obvious to anyone who saw them together. When Vincent's sister Elizabeth came to visit in March, she took one look at them and pulled Vincent aside. "You are in love with her," Elizabeth said. It was not a question. "Yes," Vincent admitted, "and her husband has been dead less than 3 months," Elizabeth said, her tone carefully neutral. "I know how it looks," Vincent said, "but Elizabeth, I cannot explain it. From the moment I found her at my gate, everything changed. I tried to fight it. I tried to do the right thing and give her space, but we fell in love anyway. It just happened." Elizabeth studied her brother for a long moment, then smiled. "I can see it in both of your faces. You look at her like she hung the moon. And she looks at you like you saved her life." "I think maybe we saved each other," Vincent said quietly. "Then I am happy for you," Elizabeth said. "Truly. You have been alone too long, Vincent. You deserve someone to share your life with. Just be prepared for some gossip in town." People can be small-minded. Vincent had not really thought about what people in Trinidad might say, but Elizabeth was right to warn him. When he and Sarah went into town together for supplies a few days later, he felt the stares and heard the whispered comments. The widow Reeves, already keeping company with another man, shameful, indecent. Sarah heard it too. Vincent saw her spine stiffen, saw the way her cheeks flushed, but she held her head high and ignored the gossips. When they were back in the wagon heading home, she said, "I do not care what they think. They do not know my heart. They do not know what Thomas and I talked about in our marriage. We promised each other that if something happened to one of us, the other would not waste time in grief. We both lost parents young. We knew how short life could be. You do not have to explain yourself to me," Vincent said. "Or to them." "I know," Sarah said, "but I want you to understand that I am not betraying Thomas's memory by loving you. I will always care about what we had. He was my first love, and he gave me happy months when we needed each other. But that chapter of my life is closed. You are my present and my future, if you will have me." Vincent reached over and took her hand. "I will have you for as long as you will let me. For the rest of my life, if you are willing." Sarah turned to him with shining eyes. "Is that a proposal, Vincent Vale?" Vincent pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road. He climbed down, came around to her side and helped her down. Then he got down on one knee in the dusty road. "Sarah Reeves, I know we have not known each other long. I know the circumstances of how we met were tragic. But I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I know that every day with you is a gift. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you make me?" Sarah was crying, but she was smiling too. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Vincent stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her while the wind blew dust around them and the horses stamped impatiently. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing. They were married in April, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with only Elizabeth and a few of Vincent's ranch hands in attendance. Sarah wore a dress of pale blue that Elizabeth had brought from Denver, and she carried wildflowers that were just beginning to bloom on the hillsides. The preacher from Trinidad performed the ceremony, looking mildly disapproving but professional. When Vincent kissed his bride, he felt like the luckiest man alive. Sarah was radiant, glowing with happiness. Any doubts anyone might have had about the speed of their courtship vanished when they saw the way the couple looked at each other. The spring and summer that followed were the happiest months of Vincent's life. He and Sarah worked the ranch together, building something that belonged to both of them. They sold Sarah's homestead to a family newly arrived from Kansas and used the money to expand Vincent's herd. They added rooms to the house, making space for the family they both hoped to have someday. They were good together in every way. Sarah was smart and capable, never afraid of hard work. Vincent was patient and kind, always willing to listen when she needed to talk. They laughed together, worked together, dreamed together. The physical side of their marriage was passionate and tender, each discovery bringing them closer. In August, Sarah began to suspect she was pregnant. By September, the doctor in Trinidad confirmed it. Vincent was overjoyed, though also terrified. He had never been a father before. What if he was not good enough? What if something went wrong? Sarah took his face in her hands and said, "We will figure it out together. That is what we do. We face things together." The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah was sick in the mornings and exhausted in the afternoons. But she remained cheerful, excited about the baby growing inside her. Vincent found himself constantly amazed by her strength. She had survived the death of her first husband, started a new life, and now was bringing a new life into the world. She was the strongest person he had ever known. Winter came again, and Sarah grew round with child. Vincent hired a woman from town to come stay with them as Sarah's time drew near. He was a wreck of nerves, jumping at every sound, certain that something terrible was about to happen. On a cold February morning, almost exactly a year after Vincent had first told Sarah he loved her, the pains began. Vincent wanted to stay with her, but the midwife shooed him out of the room. He paced the main room of the house, listening to Sarah's cries, feeling helpless and terrified. It seemed to take forever, but finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound. The thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. Vincent's heart nearly stopped. The midwife opened the door and smiled at him. "You have a son, Mr. Vale, a healthy baby boy, and your wife did wonderfully. She is tired, but she wants to see you." Vincent nearly ran into the bedroom. Sarah was propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, looking exhausted but radiantly happy. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Vincent approached slowly, almost reverently. "Come meet your son," Sarah said softly. Vincent sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He had a shock of dark hair and a red, scrunched-up face. As Vincent watched, the baby opened his eyes and seemed to look right at him. Vincent felt tears stream down his face. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. "You are perfect. I love you so much." "I love you too," Sarah said. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on anything. Now, looking at his son, Vincent said, "What about Thomas, after your first husband?" "He would have wanted a child too, I think. It seems right to honor his memory." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel like you are living in his shadow." "I am not," Vincent said firmly. "Thomas was part of your life, part of what made you who you are. He brought you to Colorado, and that eventually brought you to me. I will always be grateful to him for that. Our son should carry his name." "Thomas Vincent Vale," Sarah said, trying it out. "Tommy, Tommy," Vincent agreed. He carefully took the baby from Sarah's arms, marveling at how light he was, how fragile and precious. "Welcome to the world, Tommy. Your mother and I are going to do our best by you." The first year of Tommy's life was exhausting and wonderful. Vincent learned how to change nappies and warm bottles and walk the floor at 3 in the morning when the baby would not sleep. Sarah nursed and sang lullabies, and somehow managed to keep both the baby and the household running smoothly. Tommy was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh. He had Sarah's dark hair and Vincent's blue eyes. Watching Sarah with their son, Vincent fell in love with her all over again every single day. She was an incredible mother, patient and loving and endlessly creative in finding ways to entertain their child. As Tommy grew into a toddler, Vincent taught him about the ranch. Tommy loved the horses and would spend hours watching them in the pasture. Vincent started him on a gentle old mare, leading her around the corral while Tommy shrieked with delight. Sarah sometimes talked about Thomas, her first husband, and Vincent was glad. He did not want that part of her past to be erased or forgotten. It was part of who she was, part of her story. And young Tommy deserved to know that he was named after someone who had mattered. When Tommy was 3 years old, Sarah became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier. She knew what to expect and was not as frightened. Vincent was still a nervous wreck, but he hid it better this time. Their daughter was born in the spring, a sunny May morning when the world was green and new. They named her Violet, after Vincent's mother, and she was as different from her brother as could be. Where Tommy had been a happy, easy baby, Violet was fierce and determined from the start. She had a powerful set of lungs and opinions about everything. Vincent loved her instantly and completely. Watching Sarah nurse their daughter while Tommy played at her feet, Vincent felt a contentment so deep it almost frightened him. He had everything he had ever wanted and so much more than he had ever dreamed possible. The years passed in a blur of hard work, laughter, and love. The ranch prospered. Vincent's herd grew, and he was able to hire more hands. Sarah started a small school in Trinidad, teaching children whose families could not afford to send them to the bigger schools in larger towns. She rode into town 3 times a week, and the children adored her. Tommy grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved reading and learning. Violet was wild and fearless, always climbing things she should not climb and riding horses too fast. Vincent and Sarah sometimes worried about her, but mostly they marveled at her spirit. When Tommy was 10 and Violet was 7, Sarah surprised Vincent by telling him she was pregnant again. They were older now, Vincent in his early 40s and Sarah in her early 30s, but the news filled them both with joy. The pregnancy was harder this time. Sarah was more tired, more uncomfortable. Vincent worried constantly, but Sarah reassured him. "I am fine," she would say. "Just older and less resilient than I used to be." Their second son was born in late autumn, and they named him Samuel. He was a quiet baby, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes. Tommy and Violet were old enough to help with their little brother, and Vincent loved watching his children together, seeing the bonds forming between them. One evening when Samuel was about 6 months old, Vincent and Sarah sat on the porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard. Sarah leaned her head on Vincent's shoulder and said, "Can you believe this is our life? Sometimes I still cannot quite grasp it, that we went from that terrible night to this." Vincent wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. I think about that night often. About how close I came to not hearing you. I had been drinking, and the wind was so loud. But something made me go to the window at just the right moment. I do not believe in fate exactly, but I do think sometimes the universe gives us gifts we do not deserve. You deserved every happiness, Sarah said firmly. You had been alone for so long, working so hard. You deserved someone to share your life with. And you deserved a second chance at love, Vincent said. After everything you had been through, you deserved to be happy again. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the children. Tommy was reading aloud to Violet from one of his books while she pretended to listen, more interested in the beetle crawling across the porch step. Inside, Samuel was sleeping peacefully in his cradle. I want you to know something, Sarah said. I want you to know that I do not think of Thomas very often anymore, not in a sad way at least. He feels like someone I knew in another life, a good person who was kind to me during a difficult time. But you, Vincent, you are my real love. You are my partner, my best friend, the father of my children. You are everything. Vincent felt his throat tighten with emotion. I love you more now than I did the day we married. I did not think that was possible, but somehow you become more precious to me with every passing year. Sarah turned and kissed him, soft and sweet. We have built something beautiful together, not just this ranch or this family, but a life. A real, true life filled with love and purpose. I am so grateful to you for opening your door that night, for taking in a desperate stranger and treating her with such kindness. I would do it again in a heartbeat, Vincent said. Every single thing exactly the same because it led me to you. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear, they called the children inside for supper. The family gathered around the table, Tommy and Violet arguing good-naturedly about something that had happened at school, Samuel making happy gurgling noises from his high chair, Vincent and Sarah exchanging amused glances over the chaos. This was their life now, loud and messy and full to bursting with love. Vincent sometimes thought back to his younger self, alone in this house, nursing whiskey by the fire and wondering if he would spend his whole life in solitude. That man seemed like a stranger now. Love had transformed him, opened him up, made him into someone better than he had ever been alone. The children grew, as children do. Tommy eventually went to university in Denver, studying to become a lawyer. He wrote long letters home describing his classes and the city and the girl he was courting. Violet refused to leave the ranch, declaring that she would rather die than live in town. She became an expert horsewoman and helped Vincent run the cattle operation. Samuel, the quiet one, surprised everyone by showing a talent for music. Vincent bought him a piano, and the house was often filled with the sound of Samuel practicing scales and learning complicated pieces. Sarah continued teaching, watching generation after generation of children pass through her little school in Trinidad. She loved her work, loved seeing young minds expand and grow. Vincent loved watching her with her students, seeing the way she brought out the best in each child. As they aged, Vincent and Sarah grew even closer. They moved through their days in perfect synchronization, anticipating each other's needs, finishing each other's sentences. They had disagreements, of course, but they never went to bed angry. They had learned early on that life was too short and too precious to waste on petty arguments. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Sarah on a trip to Denver to visit Tommy, who was now a successful lawyer with a wife and a baby daughter of his own. Sarah was overjoyed to meet her granddaughter, a tiny thing named Charlotte with her grandmother's dark hair and her grandfather's blue eyes. They spent a week in the city, enjoying the luxury of sleeping late and having their meals cooked for them. But by the end of the week, both were eager to return to the ranch. It was home in a way nowhere else could ever be. On the train ride back to Trinidad, Sarah said, 20 years. Can you believe it has been 20 years since we married? 21 years since I found you at my gate, Vincent said. The best 21 years of my life. Mine too, Sarah said. I sometimes think about that version of myself, so young and so lost. If I could go back and tell her what was waiting for her, what a beautiful life was just beginning, I do not think she would believe me. I would not have believed it either, Vincent admitted. I thought I was just helping a woman in need. I had no idea I was finding my future. They held hands the rest of the way home, watching the familiar landscape roll by outside the windows. When they finally arrived at the ranch, Violet and Samuel were there to meet them, full of news about everything that had happened while they were gone. The house was warm and welcoming, full of the smell of fresh bread and coffee. That night, lying in bed with Sarah curled against his side, Vincent felt a deep sense of peace. He had lived a full life. He had loved and been loved. He had children and grandchildren. He had built something that would last beyond his own years. He had done good work and treated people fairly. He had, against all odds, been happy. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked sleepily. "Just counting my blessings," Vincent said. "And marveling at how they all started with one frozen night and a woman crying at my gate." Sarah squeezed his hand. "The best decision you ever made was opening that door." "The best decision I ever made was opening my heart," Vincent corrected. "The door was just the beginning." More years passed, each one bringing new joys and occasional sorrows. Vincent's sister Elizabeth died peacefully in her sleep at age 72. They mourned her but celebrated the good life she had lived. Sarah's milk cow, the one they had rescued from her first homestead all those years ago, finally died of old age. They buried her in the north pasture and planted a tree over her grave. Tommy had 2 more children, giving Vincent and Sarah 3 grandchildren in Denver. Violet eventually married one of the ranch hands, a quiet, hard-working man named Peter who loved her fierce spirit. They built a house on the far end of Vincent's property and started their own small herd. Samuel moved to New York City to study music at a prestigious conservatory, but he came home every summer and played concerts for the whole town. Vincent's hair turned gray, then white. His hands developed arthritis, making it harder to do the physical work he had always loved. Sarah developed a slight limp from an old injury that had never quite healed right. But they were still strong, still active, still deeply in love. On a summer evening when Vincent was 60 and Sarah was 50, they sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and well-maintained. In the distance, they could see Violet and Peter's house, smoke rising from the chimney. From inside their own house came the sound of Samuel playing piano during one of his summer visits. "We did well, did we not?" Sarah said softly. "We did better than well," Vincent said. "We built a legacy, not just this ranch but a family, good people who will go out into the world and make it better." "All because you heard me crying that night," Sarah said. "All because you chose kindness over indifference." Vincent turned to look at his wife, still beautiful to him after all these years. The lines on her face were maps of the life they had lived together, each one earned through laughter or worry or the simple passage of time. Her hair was streaked with silver now, but her eyes were still bright and full of intelligence and love. "I think we were meant to find each other," Vincent said. "I think somehow, through all the chaos and randomness of the world, we were always going to end up here together." Sarah leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet and familiar. "Then I am grateful to whatever force in the universe brought us together. You have been my joy, Vincent Vale, My partner, my love, my home. And you have been mine, Vincent said. Every single day you have been mine. As the sun set and the first stars appeared, they sat together in the gathering darkness, holding hands and counting their blessings. Inside, Samuel transitioned to a new piece, something lilting and hopeful. From the barn, they heard one of the horses whinny softly. A warm breeze carried the scent of hay and summer flowers. This was their life, simple and profound, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. It had begun with tragedy and desperation, a frozen night and a woman with nowhere else to turn. But it had become something beautiful and lasting, a love story that would be passed down through generations. Vincent thought about that young cavalry veteran who had built this ranch with his own 2 hands, who had lived alone and wondered if he would ever find someone to share his life with. He thought about that desperate young widow, stumbling through the snow in search of help. Those 2 people seemed like characters in a story someone else had written, but they were real. They had been real. And through circumstances both terrible and miraculous, they had found each other and built this life together. A life full of love and laughter and hard work and deep satisfaction. A life that mattered. As the darkness deepened and Sarah's head grew heavy on his shoulder, Vincent whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" Sarah murmured. "For crying at my gate that night. For trusting me enough to accept my help. For loving me. For building this life with me. For everything." Sarah smiled against his shoulder. "Thank you for hearing me. For opening your door. For opening your heart. For being the man I needed when I needed him most. For being the man I still need every single day." They sat together in the peaceful darkness, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and had built something that would last forever. The ranch would continue. The children and grandchildren would carry on their legacy. But more than that, they had created love in a harsh world. They had chosen kindness and compassion. They had proven that even out of tragedy and loss, beautiful things could grow. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging. The wind rustled through the grass. The piano music from inside drifted out through the open windows. And Vincent and Sarah Vale sat together on their porch, grateful for every moment they had been given, grateful for the love that had transformed both their lives, grateful for the frozen night that had brought them together and the warmth they had built ever since. Their story had begun with endings, with death and desperation and the cruel cold of winter. But it had become a story of life and hope and the enduring power of love. It was a testament to the courage it took to open your heart again after loss, to trust again after grief. It was proof that sometimes the darkest nights led to the brightest dawns. As they finally rose to go inside, Vincent took one last look at the land he loved, the home they had built together. Everything was exactly as it should be. Everything was right. He had lived a good life, loved a good woman, raised good children. He had done what he set out to do all those years ago when he mustered out of the cavalry and came to Colorado looking for peace. He had found so much more than peace. He had found purpose. He had found family. He had found love in its purest, most transformative form. And it had all started with a simple choice on a frozen night to open his door to a stranger in need. Sarah took his hand, and together they walked into their warm, bright home, into the rest of their lives, into the forever they had built together one day, one choice, one act of love at a time.